It is March 2009. The small community of Qoloktuk in Nunavut is celebrating the 80th anniversary of its Anglican mission. Retired Bishop John Sperry was a young man when he first moved there in 1950 to serve as a missionary. For almost 20 years, he called the settlement home. Now the community has invited him back to join the anniversary activities. He is returning to a place which has undergone enormous changes. Even its name has changed. White explorers used to call it Coppermine. The Anglican and Catholic churches and Sperry himself were a big part of those changes.
I was born in 1924 in England. Very early in my memory, we were told that we were and should be proud to be English. We had a huge empire in the whole world, and the color of red in the atlas did prove that somehow or other the English in their history had managed to have many, many possessions. And one of those possessions which interested me was Canada and the North. And I've got still a picture book that I did when I was 5 years old, showing the life of the Eskimo. So maybe that early interest led to a development, because much later I had some serious thoughts about serving in the life of the church among Eskimo people. So from those early days until 1950, that was when I actually went to the Arctic, to a place called Coppermine.
When Sperry took over St. Andrew's mission, he followed the footsteps of many missionaries who had ventured north before him to introduce the Inuit to Christ. Like him, most were young and enthusiastic Europeans who had genuine wish to help those they perceived to be less fortunate. At the turn of the century, Isaac Stringer was one of the first to travel north.
Wednesday, February 17th, 1892. Arose at 7:40 a.m., lectures 9 to 11 a.m., dinner 2:30 p.m. After tea, some telephoning. Writing to Bishop Reeve, decided finally to go to Mackenzie River. Wrote to Bishop signifying my willingness. Bath 10 p.m., retired 12 p.m.
When Stringer arrived in the Inuvialuit camp of Kittigaryuit on the Arctic coast 6 months later, he came upon a world completely unlike his own. Kittigaryuit was a thriving community and the heart of Inuvialuit culture. Abraham Rubin grew up in a camp on the land.
We lived a life of nomadic people. Our group, that included several families, were still tied to the land. We were still tied to the pursuit of game, caribou, seals, beluga whales, migratory game birds, and fishing.
The winters were long and harsh, and people often had to endure grueling conditions in order to find food and survive. But living in the Arctic for thousands of years, the Inuvialuit had almost perfectly adapted to this unforgiving environment. The area was rich in fur, and the Inuvialuit had established an active trade with the Hudson's Bay post at Fort McPherson. They were a prosperous group of people. In order to ensure survival, the elders passed on wisdom and knowledge to the younger generation. Legends of shamanistic rituals of centuries past were honored and celebrated. The Inuvialuit didn't welcome Stringer's attempt to convert them.
Monday, August 8th, 1892. One man brought a mink skin to trade. He wanted tea, ammunition, etc. I told him I had nothing to trade, that I had come to tell them something better than anything I could give them. He said, "What is the use of white men coming here if they have nothing for us? There is no use in you white men staying here. You had better leave."
Stringer, too, felt his zeal waning. He was unable to comprehend the Inuvialuit's indifference to his message.
It is a dull day. The morning work has not been at all encouraging. The whole work is difficult and needs much patience. I feel very much discouraged. Is it worthwhile, after all, spending so much time among those Eskimo and perhaps no good will result? The work seems so discouraging.
Abraham remembers his grandparents who were shamans. To him, the indifference of his ancestors makes perfect sense.
One of the principal tenets of the Christian faith, as stated in the Bible, relates to man's relationship to nature and the natural world around him. In the Bible it states that man, you shall have dominion over nature. It's a philosophy that ran totally against the grain of native cultures around the world.
One man said he had never heard before that there was one God who was before all and made all things. One man said that he did not believe in a God, or that men went to heaven when they died. Did I ever see anyone going to heaven? Did I ever see God?
The concepts of heaven and hell were alien to the Inuvialuit. They had a completely different worldview.
And shamanism basically stems from the belief in the spirit world and man's relationship to his natural environment. And in that natural environment is not just what we see and experience physically, but what is also in the invisible world, what we see outside of our senses. They have always understood that the world beyond our physical senses is as real as everything that we do during the course of a day. Dreams are as real as our daily activities. They believed that all living things were imbued with soul, and that all life was sacred, and that those who hunted animals and birds and fish for their food. In order to maintain a balanced relationship, they had to give reverence to the animals that they hunted, give the animals their respect that was due. The greatest fear that they had was that because they were souls, they had to consume other souls in order to survive.
But this concept of balance with man and animals as equals was about to be badly shaken. By the mid-1890s, dozens of commercial whaling ships descended upon the Beaufort Sea. By the hundreds, the whales were slaughtered for oil and baleen alone. The bodies were thrown back in the ocean and left to rot. It was a spectacle of power and waste that was deeply disturbing to the Inuit. According to the ancient taboos, this behavior was unthinkable. Andrew Atagotaluk is the first Inuk to be the Anglican Bishop of the Arctic. His people were overwhelmed with the arrogance of the newcomers.
For a long time, I think the Inuit people felt that the white people were superior because of the equipments they have, the power that they have, and they were respected for that visible stature.
The white men were capable of other awe-inspiring displays of power. And many Inuit were intrigued by the opportunities the whalers and the traders had to offer. On Herschel Island, a few hundred kilometers west of Kittigaryuit, a small city sprang up as the whalers overwintered there, before returning south with their bounty. They brought new and amazing things to eat, incredible tools that made life much easier, and marvelous ways of entertainment. There was an increased opportunity to trade, and the whaling ships always needed deckhands. Inuit could earn wages and take part in this new exciting lifestyle. Many prospered on trapping and bought their own schooners. The ways of the elders began to lose significance.
So the whole perspective of who you are in the creation of God became very different. Traditionally, Christianity means going out, just like Jesus said, you go out and make disciples. But doing that, I think, it was done in a way that, people never took the time to understand how best to sort of get to know the environment and the way of life that these people were living. And kind of, in some ways, I think a lot of people view it that it was kind of come in and try to do in a short time. So a lot of it was like, I guess some people would say, sort of forced event, so that people felt that, they had to accept this. The spirituality, on the other hand, began to become kind of a faded belief that it was not enough to answer the kind of life that they lived.
People began to reach out to Isaac Stringer. In 1909, Almost 20 years after Stringer first arrived, the first Inuvialuit chose to become Christians.
Apagput, kilang murutin. At kin nagugiyawli. At
Atanakawin,
Kaili.
Kaili, Isumatin,
Umatin,
Tanayli, Ubulumi, Ililuon, Rakot,
When my Uncle Johnny was born, when he was a young boy, on his second summer, he was 2 years old, his parents had some visitors, some elders who came to visit. One of the elderly couple gave Johnny a little toy drum. Then Johnny, just out of the blue, starts with the drum and starts hitting the drum and singing to himself. But he's playing the drum as if he was singing an ancient drum song. But the song that he's singing is an old shaman song about the King Loon. And this song is a magic song. It's a shaman song calling on the loon to come, the loon spirit to come, and no one had ever taught him. His parents didn't know that he knew this song, but here's Johnny singing. Then this elderly couple look up, and out of the blue sky is a king loon flying overhead, and the king loon starts calling. And they went into the tent and they told their parents, come out and see this. And the parents hear Johnny singing this song, and they both come out. And the mother looks up and sees this king loon, and the father looks up, and the mother goes in and snatched the drum away from Johnny's hands and broke it. And told this elderly couple, I don't want any of this. My son is not going to become a shaman. We don't need this anymore. We're Christians.
Amen.
The new religion had finally begun to take hold, and the churches pushed farther east. In 1916, missionary Herbert Gerling set out to reach the remote Qitalmute of Coronation Gulf. For many of the people there, it was the first time they ever saw a white man. But it wasn't just the white strangers who spoke of God and His Son. With Gerling traveled Inuvialuit and Inupiat from Alaska, who had embraced a new lifestyle and religion. They began ministering to their own people. Morris Nereyok remembers a story his dad told him about those days.
That he came from Alaska with him by the boat. He's a Christian. He got books. He got books on it. So this guy, he got one book. That book, my dad, he bought it. That book with caribou shoes. That book he bought it with the caribou shoes. He traded with the caribou shoes. So my dad started reading somehow. I don't know how he started reading these books. But God, he teach him how to read. I don't know. Nobody knows. That's how my parents became a Christian.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once the first missionaries that start to speak the language, I think the message began to become more on a personal basis. So there is a stories that we have with our history is that the Inuit themselves, once they got the message in their own language and began to own it as their faith, they want to share that with another camp over there somewhere. So they went for hundreds and hundreds of miles, some of them visiting from camp to camp. This is what we have heard. This is what we have found out about God, and wanted to share that they have come to know. The story of Jesus that they have come to know personally was such a wonderful event for them that they want, you see, Inuit people have this culture of sharing things, eh? So when Christianity came and it became in a personal experience, they wanted to share it the same way they share these other commodities of that life, in that life, and began to travel around sharing the story. And I think that's how much of our Christian faith has been established in a lot of the places. Their own people coming to tell the story about what they have experienced.
People, he take turn, take the service. In a Sundays, after church, in a igloo, every one of them, he go to church. Little kids, he follow them to go to church. Nobody stay home. Everybody go to church.
Later in his life, Morris became a lay reader himself. He still holds a service every Sunday in his home community of Ulukaktu.
Luke chapter 4, verse 16 minganit, 30 mutikitu. Ahay dia sim na swati kita, nuna minut, sabat yutil lugo, pitkohin ni maligamiuk, at uwing mungaktok, tayo ka ni nangektok, tayo kublugo, inuilo, tuniyat, naunay, nalaw tayo, ay saya magperanganik, magpekami, naniyay, hapkwat, ukawin, at anong anang narata, nayoktanga, ukokekperami nga, ilihoyit kublo nga, unipkainik nakunik ilingayunon. Tiliang alo, ukawit kubluwit, itaktaw may anibikanik, takpitulo, takpikipaksitaw, kubluwit lo. Ayaw kaktut, ayaw kaktitaw yun, ikayok dot kubluwit lo. Ho. Ubagot, malingit ilo takaan mo. Ubagot na patipting ni, itaktahe mayo inapta. Itaktahe mayo ilingagapta. Tayo may tumigdiya tam na, ukaw tigiya, tap ko na nga. Ukaw tigiya tayo may tumig, nauna kugo. Ahilo, tap humani, diya tunipkak tunak to inung tap ko na nga. Ukuan ngu kadim ukahe kalawangit, ukuat. Kadim ngu ukahe kalawangit. Inung nun nga ukuno nga, itaktahe may tunut, hungit tuto ilitut. Uumatimnin
My mother was one that tell us stories about what was life like. She was born in the time when Christianity was becoming the faith of the people. And many a times she would say that people lived in fear. They were very strict rules. And I think a lot of them were sort of expressed that when Christianity came, they felt they were free from this fear of spirits and how they control people's lives. I think the main message of the Christian faith is that Jesus came as an individual who was from God, the Son of God, as he claimed, and could be experienced in a personal way. It's a personal relationship. And I think that's where people were missing at the time. I think that's the main reason why, people tend to have very strong faith in God through that perspective of, there's a Son of God visible in a way that one person can understand, which where before, even if we deal with our spirituality, we could not have that kind of relation with spirits unless you had a key person who was doing all the communicating, Once Jesus came, that one requiring only one mediator between God and men became expounded to all of the people who have come to faith in Jesus Christ can now have access to God personally without having to wait for an individual who has been chosen to do this.
Today, the trip from Yellowknife only takes a couple of hours, and after a short flight, John Sperry arrives in Qoqoloktok.
Welcome home, Sperry.
This sense of invasion of cultures I didn't have, and nor were there any sense of that which we hear about these days. And we were so anxious to serve, and it was an interest in their life. And the message we're showing and passing along has been a blessing to other people, and it can be to you. Jesus himself said to his disciples, "Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature." Now, he is assuming, and the Lord is assuming, that the fellowship, the sharing, the standards of the New Testament need to be shared with everybody.
Rini Uliktuak remembers those early days well. When she was a young woman, her husband traveled with Sperry as his trusted guide and lay reader.
Talba ukiyang ukiyam nuk talba ni ukiya katawgam nuk tatkakeon hunangong mat mas miloni ipol miloni awlalak tuk ilihi mayakka binihita awla katigiya talba hamanga donamot kokolok tumit tuk tutuk ko khotik kikik tanayuk ko khotik tabo na tayriyo kut kangriyo mot itivitutik inungnutan makangamik atulablutik ilihaw jilablutik inungning. Kobiya nakayuti wagtok inub tuhaga ngamiyuk ilumini uman mini ihumamini kobiya ho tigilaki wagta.
Now, it doesn't mean to say that there were no good things in the original religions. People living in a different culture and accepting different standards are people who obviously accepted what they understood and what was demanded in society. So it's not a point of decrying and demeaning earlier concepts. But by and large, the fact of having a God in heaven who made everything and who listened to the prayers of the faithful is much stronger.
And just as much as Sperry wanted to share the benefits of his religion, he wanted to let the Inuit take part in the progress that was happening in Europe and North America.
There was no sense of freedom and security ever. The old days were days of fairly constant starvation. Many people died of starvation. And one thing we can say, when the modern days arrived and the implements were available, is starvation was finished. Who can argue about the power of a rifle compared with a bow and arrow? You don't starve if you can kill food to keep you alive. No one is going to argue about that. So if you think of all the advantages of this different culture.
This different culture was not just able to provide rifles, primus stoves, fish nets, and steel needles, and pots and pans, but also health care, education, unlimited amounts of food, houses supplied with heat and electricity, and a connection with the rest of the world by radio, TV, and airplanes.
I'm born around 1950, and I was born in a tent in the fall time. And from that, shortly after, people were already forming into communities. And then when people form into communities, there was radios and TVs coming, in a very short time. And people never had the chance to really either think about how they should involve themselves into this.
The year was 1956, the winter that my grandfather passed away. I was about 5 years old. He had called on his sons to come to his bedside, and possibly this would be the last time he would have a chance to speak to all of his sons. He wanted to tell them that what they needed to know before he left them for good. And his last words were that our people were going through another change, and that the changes were becoming fast, and that they would have to be able to adapt to them. I realized that what he was talking about was happening all around us. Our culture was changing. The demands on our people would be greater. We would gain a lot in material goods, but also lose in our cultural heritage.
We all have role models when we're growing up. And some of the more successful men we see, we want to become like them one day. When people form into a community and you find those people that were decision makers in your camp and who were your people you admire, that one day you would have that same kind of ability. Some of these leaders became janitors in schools, or they're stock boys at Hudson's Bay Company, And so I think the whole future of your dreams sort of lingered out, and you no longer feel proud of who you are, because you don't want. This is the man that was one of the outstanding role models in the camp. Now he's not one of the decision makers. This is only an example of how fast the life really moved, and people were not prepared for it. And that is why today I think elders tend to talk about something in the past. Rarely they will talk about how to put a hope and dream for young people for tomorrow, because they're still catching up on what took place today. And I think that plays a very important part in how, why we have so many negative issues today we're still trying to resolve.
In Koloktok, the festivities are getting underway. Millie was a little girl when Sperry first arrived.
Everybody's been looking forward for Sperry coming home. In the photo here with the Sperry was the year that Mr. Sperry came to be the minister here in Kokoloktok in Copper Mine back in the day of our community being known as Copper Mine, and he's got 19 years of history in our community where he himself was married in the church and raised his children here in the community as well. So that's why it made Sperry it was such a welcoming atmosphere for the community to welcome Sperry back to our community, because he more or less helped the people learn to do many things in settlement living, coming from the igloos into homes that were being built. So he was very much a part of the changing era from land living to community living. He was a very honest and respectful man. He and his family gave from their hearts to the community.
Doris thinks very warmly of him as well.
He was just like adopted son to the whole community when he first came.
One gets to know all about life, the disappointments and the heartbreaks and the difficulties, and one gets very close as a clergyman and advisor and comforter, and you're there when the little babies are born and come into the world, and you're there when sometimes and older people and sometimes younger people die, and you're with them and you help dig the graves, and you become enmeshed in all of life, and became one of them. This is the minister Uvanga building a house. I started on one morning and finished the following weekend. Itutuyo. Anyway, we all just had to do our
Today, Sperry is nostalgic about the old days.
Well, there are times when one thinks about it, and in your own experience, there are times when my pictures bring it back. Traveling by a rattling skidoo is not the same as when the dogs, you've got to work with dogs, and when it's rough with ice all over the place, it's hard work, but it was good. Nobody grumbled about it, and you still remember that. You remember the camps and all the little kids there, and the fun we had, and the services we had, and everybody came to church. Our church was full. No TV. There was no hockey to take you away. The world is so different. 6 or 7 families lived in Kugluktuk. When I later when I was there, I never ever thought that it would have all these scores of houses served by power and television and everything else happening. No. Never thought of it. And in a sense, not regretted the support, but regretted the results of that kind of development.
On a quiet afternoon, Sperry goes to see the old mission house, the place he lived in when he first arrived in Kogloktok.
Now, in the old days, the old people had the wisdom, memories, knowledge. They passed on in story form, in practical advice to the younger folk. They were invaluable. It brings back so many memories. It's been just used as a warehouse, and I just remember when it wasn't. So it's a bit of a touch of nostalgia. But when you get older, if you have not got a grasp of the knowledge of the modern generation, if you cannot convey to your family, your younger family, anything of your experience, of your wisdom, if you cannot do it, and it's not needed anyway, the reason for life and being useful dwindles, and it is possible to feel a sense of worthlessness. So old age is interesting and a bit frightening. Who wants to listen to an old man telling how he shot his first caribou? Compared with being able to switch on your TV and watch all-star wrestling. That's more exciting. Listening to a man whose language you can hardly understand.